All right, so welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to be exploring Buddhism in Southeast Asia.
Sounds good.
We've got this super fascinating article from an academic journal
Ah.
all about how Buddhism spread there and,
Yeah.
and whether its philosophy could actually help with like today's interreligious conflicts.
Oh, wow. That's a really intriguing question.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about just how long Buddhism has been in the region.
Yeah.
I mean, think like 3,500 BC.
3,500 BC.
That's older than any written accounts
Oh, wow.
of Buddhism itself.
That's almost hard to even grasp,
Right?
That's like so far back.
It is.
What does that even say about how we view ancient history?
I know. It really makes you kind of rethink those timelines, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally.
But what I find really fascinating is that this suggests that Buddhism was already a part of Southeast Asian culture. Way before it was even like a formalized religion.
Yeah.
It was already there, like influencing local beliefs and practices.
Oh, wow.
For centuries before it even had a name as we know it.
So how did it even get there in the first place?
Wow.
Was it like through conquest, like some other religions?
That's a great question, and actually no.
Oh.
It seems like unlike some religions that spread through force,
Yeah.
Buddhism arrived more through trade routes with India.
Huh.
So those merchants, they weren't just bringing spices and silks.
Mhm.
They were bringing ideas too.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and those
Did you
ideas...
no crusades? No.
Not that we know of, no.
Nothing like that.
No.
How did that shape Buddhism's relationship then with political power
That is a great question.
compared to other religions?
From what we can tell, rulers in Southeast Asia often embraced Buddhism as a way to kind of bring morality to their people.
Okay.
But there's really no evidence of any forced conversions.
Oh, wow.
It seems like it was adopted much more organically, which is pretty unique when you think about it.
Okay, so it was more about like the appeal of the philosophy itself rather than like being imposed from above. Exactly.
Which makes sense considering how long it was already in the region.
Yeah, yeah.
Can we talk about like those incredible temples?
Oh, yeah.
Like Borobudur in Indonesia
Yes.
and Angkor Wat in Cambodia.
Absolutely. They're like these amazing time capsules
Yeah.
of how deeply embedded Buddhism became in Southeast Asian societies.
Yeah.
Think about Borobudur, for example.
Okay.
That was lost for centuries under volcanic ash and jungle growth.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine rediscovering that in the 19th century?
Talk about a lost city.
Think about a lost city, I know.
It makes you want to book a flight right now.
I know, right?
Though I doubt I would look as cool as Indiana Jones, like navigating those ancient ruins.
Right.
But these temples also show how Buddhism went like beyond just like a personal faith.
Yeah,
It became tied in with national identity in places like Myanmar, Thailand, and Sri Lanka.
you're absolutely right. It was woven into the very fabric of society.
But then colonialism
Yeah.
like disrupted that traditional bond.
It really did. European powers came in,
Yeah.
imposed their own systems, and often undermined the influence of Buddhist institutions.
Right.
So colonialism really shook things up.
It did.
You mentioned earlier that monks kind of play a complex role today.
Yeah.
What kind of like tensions does that create for them in navigating the modern nation state?
Well, it's a real balancing act.
Yeah.
Because before colonialism, the state often supported what's called the Sangha.
Uh-huh.
That's the community of monks,
Right.
a really vital part of Buddhist life.
Yeah.
But in our post-colonial world, there's this tension between Buddhism's traditional role
Yeah.
and the kind of the secularization of many Southeast Asian states.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of like different roles, can we talk about like the two main branches of Buddhism, Theravada and Mahayana?
Yeah, absolutely.
You might already be familiar with them.
Yeah.
But think about it this way, like Theravada, which is common in Thailand and Myanmar,
Right.
it's all about personal liberation.
Right.
Like it's a toolkit for your journey to enlightenment.
That's a great way to put it.
And then you have Mahayana,
Mm-hmm.
which is prevalent in Vietnam, for example.
Yeah.
It's about extending that compassion outward,
Yeah.
helping all beings find liberation.
Right.
So Theravada is about focusing inward,
Uh-huh.
and Mahayana is more about taking action
Yeah.
to help others.
That's a good way to sum it up.
While they have different emphasis, they both share
Right.
core Buddhist values like nonviolence, compassion, and mindfulness.
Exactly. And understanding these different approaches, I think,
Yeah.
is really crucial for understanding how Buddhism kind of plays out in Southeast Asia today.
All right, so we've got this ancient religion
Right.
arriving peacefully,
Yeah.
becoming like super embedded in the culture,
Totally.
and then getting shaken up by colonialism. And within Buddhism itself, you've
Yeah.
got these different branches with different focuses.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it really sets the stage, I think, for understanding this very complex landscape of Buddhism in Southeast Asia today.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it helps us kind of grapple with that question
Right.
of whether Buddhism's philosophy can really offer solutions
Yeah.
to these modern interreligious conflicts.
It's a big question.
It is a big question.
We'll see what we find out.
Yeah, we'll see.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Buddhism in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
We've already covered so much ground. It's amazing.
It is.
From the ancient arrival of Buddhism to those intricate temples, and of course those two main branches, Theravada and Mahayana.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. And I think all that historical context really helps us understand
Yeah.
the complex role Buddhism plays in the region today.
Right, because we've been talking about Buddhism as this peaceful tradition, but then you have situations like the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar,
Right.
where some Buddhists have been involved in violence against Muslims.
It's
Hard to reconcile those two things.
It is. And that's why it's so important to remember that Buddhism, like any religion,
Yeah.
isn't a monolith.
Right.
There are diverse interpretations, different schools of thought.
Yeah.
Individuals can hold a wide range of beliefs.
So it's too simplistic to just like blame Buddhism itself
Exactly.
for those conflicts.
Yeah. It would be like blaming all Christians for the Crusades.
Right. Yeah.
We have to be careful about those kinds of sweeping generalizations.
Yeah.
We also have to acknowledge that hysterical and political factors play a huge role in how religious beliefs are expressed
Right.
and sometimes distorted.
That makes sense. And speaking of history, the article we're deep diving into mentions this interesting idea that the traditional relationship between Buddhism and national identity in countries like Myanmar, Thailand, and Sri Lanka was disrupted by colonialism.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you elaborate on that a little?
Sure. So before colonialism, Buddhism was deeply intertwined with the concept of nationhood
Okay.
in many Southeast Asian societies.
Yeah.
Rulers often saw themselves as protectors of the faith,
Okay.
and monks had significant social and political influence.
So it was like a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, exactly.
Buddhism provided a moral framework and legitimacy,
Right.
and the state supported the Buddhist community.
Precisely, Buddhism provided moral guidance, and in return,
Yeah.
the state supported the Sangha, the community of monks.
Right.
It was a system that worked really well for centuries.
But when European powers arrived,
Yeah.
they imposed their own systems of government
Right.
and often sought to undermine traditional power structures, including the influence of Buddhist institutions.
Yes.
It sounds like colonialism created a kind of identity crisis for Buddhism in these countries.
You could say that, and the effects are still being felt today.
Wow.
In some countries, particularly Myanmar and Sri Lanka,
Okay.
monks have become increasingly vocal in national politics,
Hmm.
sometimes advocating for a return to a more traditional Buddhist-centric
Right.
view of the nation.
So it's like this pendulum swing.
Buddhism was central, then colonialism disrupted that, and now some Buddhists are pushing back against secularization,
Right.
trying to reclaim their traditional role in society.
That's a really insightful observation.
And this dynamic creates real challenges, I imagine,
It does.
for promoting interreligious harmony.
Yeah. If Buddhism is seen as inextricably linked to national identity,
Yeah.
it can create this us versus them mentality
Right.
that excludes religious minorities.
That makes a lot of sense, and this helps explain, I guess, why tensions can flare up,
Right.
even in places with a history of religious tolerance,
Exactly.
like Thailand.
Oh, yeah.
But where we mentioned there's been conflict with Malay Muslim rebels in the south.
Right.
It's not just about religion, it's also about power identity
Yeah.
and historical grievances.
You've hit the nail on the head.
So where does that leave us?
Right.
Is there any hope for Buddhism to contribute to peace building in these situations?
Well, that's the question.
That a lot of Buddhist leaders, scholars, and activists
Right.
are grappling with right now.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
But the article does point out that some Buddhist monks are actually on the front lines of promoting dialogue and peacemaking.
Oh, wow.
Even in conflict zones.
That's encouraging to hear.
It is.
So there's still a strong current within Buddhism that's actively engaged in peace building.
Yes, and it's not just monks either.
Oh.
There are lay Buddhist organizations and individuals working on issues like conflict resolution, interfaith dialogue, and social justice.
So they're really trying to reclaim those core values of Buddhism.
Exactly.
Compassion, nonviolence, understanding.
Right.
And apply them to the problems we face today.
Yes. It's a real effort to translate those ancient teachings into action.
Yeah.
That makes a difference in the here and now.
It's a much needed dose of optimism, I think. Especially with all the negative headlines we see. It reminds us that there are people working hard for a better world.
Absolutely. It's crucial to highlight those efforts because they often don't get the attention they deserve.
Right.
These peace builders are the unsung heroes of our time.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenge, the historical context, and some of these positive developments.
Right.
But what about the average person living in Southeast Asia? How do they experience Buddhism in everyday life?
It's definitely something they live beyond the political and philosophical debates. Buddhism is deeply embedded in the cultural fabric of Southeast Asian societies.
So daily life is infused with Buddhist rituals and practices.
Yes,
and values. Can you give us some examples? We're really curious to hear how this plays out in practice.
Well, in Thailand, for example, it's common for young men to spend some time as monks, even if it's just for a few weeks or months.
Oh, wow.
It's seen as a way to earn merit, gain spiritual insights, and show respect to one's parents.
Wow. So being a monk isn't just a lifelong calling.
Right.
It's also like a rite of passage for many.
Yes, exactly. And it's not just Thailand. In Myanmar, meditation is a deeply ingrained practice with people from all walks of life engaging in mindfulness techniques.
And throughout the region, you'll find Buddhist teachings on karma, compassion, and non-attachment. Influencing everything from social etiquette to how people make decisions.
Exactly.
It sounds like Buddhism provides a sort of moral compass for a lot of people in Southeast Asia.
That's a great way to put it.
Guiding their thoughts, actions, and how they interact with others.
But it's important to recognize that this lived experience of Buddhism can be a powerful force for peace and harmony.
Yeah.
Even in the face of conflict.
Right.
Those teachings on compassion and understanding are woven into the culture itself.
Right.
Shaping how people relate to each other.
Yeah.
Even across religious divides.
This deep dive is really eye-opening. Buddhism in Southeast Asia is so complex. It's a tradition with a deep and rich history. But it's also constantly evolving and adapting to new challenges.
It is.
Welcome back to our final deep dive into Buddhism and peace in Southeast Asia. It feels like we've traveled through time, explored ancient temples.
We have.
And really wrestled with some complex questions.
I think as we wrap up, it's important to bring everything back to that core question we started with.
Yeah.
Can Buddhism's philosophy actually offer solutions to these modern-day interreligious conflicts?
Right, especially after discussing those difficult situations like the Rohingya crisis, the tensions in southern Thailand, and how colonialism impacted that relationship between Buddhism and national identity.
Right. Those are some heavy topics.
Yeah, they are.
And while simple answers are hard to come by, I think looking at how Buddhist principles are being put into practice today to promote peace can give us some insights.
Yeah, the article we're discussing highlighted some really inspiring examples of Buddhist monks and organizations working across those religious divides to build bridges and promote understanding.
Absolutely.
It sounds like they're doing more than just talking about it.
What's striking is that these aren't just theoretical discussions or philosophical debates.
Right.
People are engaging in very practical on-the-ground work to make a real difference.
So it's about translating those core values of compassion, nonviolence, and understanding into concrete actions.
Precisely.
We're talking about mediating between communities in conflict, providing humanitarian aid, promoting dialogue between different faiths, even advocating for policies that protect religious minorities.
Yeah, it's really about putting those values into action.
It's almost like weaving a tapestry of peace.
I like that.
Thread by thread, action by action.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And each action, however small, contributes to a larger vision of a more just and harmonious world.
A more just and harmonious world.
You know, this makes me think about the two main branches of Buddhism we discussed, Theravada and Mahayana.
Yes.
Do they approach peace building in different ways?
That's a really thoughtful question. And while both traditions share those fundamental Buddhist values, their emphasis can lead to some different approaches.
Okay.
So, for example, Theravada, with its focus on individual enlightenment, might prioritize personal transformation as that foundation for peace. It's like saying, work on yourself first, and then that inner peace will kind of ripple outwards.
And then Mahayana, being more focused on compassion and helping others, would be more outwardly focused.
Exactly.
So Mahayana might emphasize social action and alleviating suffering more directly.
Yes, it's about actively engaging with the world to make that positive difference.
So it's like two sides of the same coin working together. Inner peace as a prerequisite for outer peace.
That's a great way to think about it.
And in practice, you often see a blend of these approaches.
Absolutely.
A monk trained in Theravada meditation might use those skills, cultivate inner peace, which then empowers them to engage in Mahayana-inspired social action.
That's a good point.
So the individual and the collective working hand in hand to create a more peaceful world.
Precisely. It highlights how Buddhism offers that holistic approach to peace building.
Yeah.
It addresses both the internal roots of conflict, like anger and hatred, and those external manifestations like violence and injustice.
Are there any specific examples from the article that really illustrate how these different Buddhist approaches are being put into action?
Yeah, absolutely. It mentions Theravada monks in Thailand using mindfulness techniques to help people in conflict zones cope with trauma and anger.
Wow.
And on the Mahayana side, it highlights organizations in Cambodia working to rebuild communities and promote reconciliation after years of violence.
It's almost like even in the darkest of times, those sparks of compassion and resilience find a way to shine through.
That's a great way to put it.
And remember, these efforts often happen so quietly, without a lot of fanfare.
Right.
But they're making a real difference in the lives of so many people.
They really are.
It's so inspiring to hear about these peace builders working tirelessly to create a better world.
Yeah, they're really living examples of those Buddhist ideals we've been discussing.
They truly are, and their work reminds us that peace isn't some abstract concept or distant utopia.
Exactly.
It's something we actively cultivate, moment by moment, action by action.
I love that peace is a practice, not just a goal. It makes it feel so much more attainable. Like something we can all participate in.
Exactly, and that practice can take so many forms.
Right.
It could be meditating on compassion, speaking out against injustice, or simply offering a kind word to someone who needs it.
Right. Every act of kindness, every step toward understanding contributes to that tapestry of peace we talked about.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
Yeah, it has.
We started by asking if Buddhism could offer solutions to modern interreligious conflict. It's clear that the answer is complex.
Right.
But within this ancient tradition, there's so much wisdom and so many practices that can illuminate the path towards a more peaceful world.
I couldn't agree more. Buddhism's emphasis on inner transformation, compassion, nonviolence, and understanding provides such a profound framework for navigating the challenges we face in the world today.
It's been a real journey of discovery.
It has.
And while it's important to acknowledge those historical complexities and the times when those ideals haven't been upheld, it's equally important to celebrate the individuals and organizations who are actively embodying those values and working to build those bridges of peace.
Beautifully said. And as we wrap up, I want to encourage you all to reflect on how these Buddhist principles might inspire your own actions and interaction. How can you cultivate greater compassion and understanding in your own life?
It's a good question.
How can you contribute to a more just and harmonious world, even in small ways? Remember, every act of kindness, every step towards peace ripples outwards, creating a more beautiful world for all of us.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
Your journey be filled with peace, compassion, and understanding.
And may we all continue to learn and grow together, weaving a tapestry of peace that embraces all beings.